Welcome to the Chaos Sector. We return to the Matrix. I know some may be getting a little tired of us focusing on Kamala Harris, but I don't think you truly understand what's at stake here. An interesting dynamic that we haven't touched on yet is the level of stress a president endures. Yes, the level of stress is the equivalent of a soldier under fire from an enemy, with a fallen comrade and another injured comrade by their side, and they have to think about several options all at once in a small window of time. Stressful. Does Harris have the mental fortitude to endure such stress? I would suggest no, she doesn't. Recently, Harris attended an event in Philadelphia. And let's just say the vehicle has run out of gas. From the beginning, it was a disaster. When one of the journalists introduced Harris, audience members initially didn't applaud her. Then slowly there were what we call golf claps. Golf claps for the vice president. I think the reason there was this detached greeting is because Harris is simply void of life. And that seems ironic, because she is known for, quote, cackling and being joyful. But that event consists of very serious audience members, serious journalists, and serious issues they wanted to discuss with her. And that's the problem. When it's serious, you see just how void Harris is. Here's the thing. We, of course, had to review this event for our report. And let's just say, listening to Harris was atrocious. I try to give her the benefit of the doubt, as there are moments where it actually appears she, well, has a soul, where her message can be felt. But most of the time, which is like 90% of the time, it's extremely difficult to listen. The first question posed to Harris was, are Americans better off now than they were 4 years ago? Now, this question has been asked before, and what the question is subliminally saying is, how do you plan to fix the economic crisis that you helped create? And of course, Harris is aware that the current problem is partly her responsibility. And see, this is where the void energy comes into play. But her response was as such, quote, so when we came into, well, first of all, let me just say it is good to be here with the National Association of Black Journalists, unquote. Now, there's nothing wrong with that formal greeting, but instinctively, she responded in a defensive manner. When she said the phrase, so when we came into, in response to the question if Americans are better off now than 4 years ago, it is saying that there is something prior to this administration that is associated with the condition of the American people, which is establishing a lack of accountability, even if it hasn't been proven in the inquiry at that point, you understand. But let's break it down a bit more. Quote, 4 years ago when we came in during the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. We came in during the worst public health epidemic in centuries. We came in after the worst attack on a democracy since the Civil War, and a lot of due in large part to the mismanagement of the former president as it relates to Clover 19, our nickname for it, of course, and obviously January 6th, and we had then a lot of work to do to clean up the mess. As of today, we have created over 16 million new jobs, over 800,000 new manufacturing. We have the lowest black unemployment rate in generations. Okay, I could keep going, but this is exactly what I'm talking about. It's frustrating. Should I keep going? What do you guys think? Mind you, this is verbatim from the event. I'm not paraphrasing or misquoting what Harris said here. I think I'll keep going. We have invested in small businesses, and I'm there to benefit of many people, but including small businesses. Some of the highest rates of creation of new black small businesses in years. We have done the work of capping the cost of prescription medication for our seniors for issues like insulin. And again, I'm speaking to the black journalists who care about all people. But in particular, I'll talk about black people, where we know black folks are 60% more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes. And we have now finally capped the cost of insulin for seniors at $35 a month. Capped the cost of prescription medication for our seniors at $22,000 a year. Because we, unlike the former president who promised to do it, we finally have allowed Medicare to negotiate drug prices against the big pharmaceutical companies. And these are just some of the accomplishments. Is the price of groceries too high? Yes. Do we still have work to do? Yes. And I will tell you, I do believe that I offer a new generation of leadership for our country that is about, in particular, turning the page on an era that sadly has shown us attempts by some to incite fear, to create division in our country, and to do the work that is about bringing some level of optimism, and dare I say ambition, about what I know is possible in our country. And so my plan for the economy, unquote, now I'm going to stop right at this point. If we go back to the original question, we see why Harris responded with this fully loaded bag of fluffy feathers. The question posed to Harris was, are Americans better off now than they were 4 years ago? Which was preceded by a statement about Americans concerned about the economy. Now, pay attention to what this question is actually saying. The question was supposed to be asked like so. Are Americans better off under the Biden-Harris administration than the Trump administration in regards to the economy? The difference in how it's posed to Harris keeps her from slipping into a phantom space like she did. It keeps her from slipping into a phantom space of not directly answering if the American citizens are better off economically. That's the topic, the economy, but it wasn't posed to Harris in this manner. So it allowed her to evade directly answering if Americans are better off economically, which of course gave her more room to wiggle in attacks against the previous administration. But nevertheless, even with the question being posed to Harris in a delicate manner, she still bloviated a big nothing burger out to the audience and the journalists. Don't have the patience to fact-check all of those claims, but let's go over a few before we continue. Her claim about arriving in the worst unemployment rate since the Great Depression. It's not even worth fact-checking that. It's a subliminal attack, but it's not warranted. The next claim she made was that the administration came in after the worst public health epidemic. So what she is doing here is using the Clover virus as an excuse, but won't give the prior administration the same benefit of the doubt. And the truth of the matter, this administration came in on the back end of the epidemic. Inflation had dropped down to approximately 2%, which is exceptional considering the circumstance, and the economy had stabilized, with American citizens returning to work. So unemployment continued to decrease when Harris took office. If you're going to lie, try to use lies that have to be dug up to expose, not lies that are instantly checked at the door. Then she claimed that this administration had the lowest black unemployment rate in generations. So this is very dishonest, because the black unemployment rate is included with the same recovering employment rate which started before this administration came into office. But Harris is claiming it is this administration that reduced the black unemployment rate, when in reality it was just the process of recovery, not anything specifically they had done. Trump, to the contrary, actually decreased the black unemployment rate by investing in small businesses, which obviously employed black business owners and entrepreneurs. In addition, cutting taxes on the wealthy, which includes CEOs of major companies, by the way, helped employ more workers, which include black people. Then Harris claimed this administration capped the cost of prescription medication for our, that's a key term she used, for our senior citizens, for issues like insulin. Now at this point, she states black people in one instant. Then she states black folk in another. This was an attempt to resonate with the older individuals in the audience, and also convince this audience that she cares about black senior citizens. Well, if we revisit the Inflation Reduction Act bill that was passed by this administration, Medicare Part D, which is specifically for lower income patients, which include those very, quote, black folks. This administration only spent $44 billion on this plan. But get this, spent $80 billion in hiring 87,000 new IRS employees. If you cared about those, quote, black folks, you, Miss Harris, would have sent the bill back to be revised, in shaving some 25 to 40 billion from the IRS spending, and invest that into Medicare Part D. You're spending the money anyway, so spend it on those senior citizens and the insulin they need. But what do you expect with corrupt politicians? Okay, let's try to continue, as we hope she'll get into an economic plan. Keep in mind, Harris is still talking at this point. The journalists have not asked another question. This is her drawn-out response to the first question, about if Americans are better off now than 4 years ago. We'll finish where we left off. Quote, so my plan for the economy includes what I imagine and believe and call an opportunity economy, what we can do to grow an opportunity economy where all people have access to the resources to compete, to apply their incredible work ethic, their ambition, their aspirations, and their dreams, and actually not just get by, but get ahead. And I can talk in more detail about it. But specifically, I'll mention a few things. Yeah, one of the big issues that affects people right now in terms of the economy and their economic well-being is we have a shortage of housing supply. It's too expensive. People can't afford to buy a home. You know, we grew up our parents where they had the ability to somehow believed the American dream was attainable, not so much for younger working people. And I recognize that, so my approach is a new approach, which is to say, let's just take this and deal with it head on. And part of my approach is to say I'm going to employ and engage the private sector, in particular home builders with tax credits, to give them the incentive to create new housing. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't continue. This is a national disgrace, and it's also a global disgrace at this point. Kamala Harris is impossible. I mean, it's not about necessarily being the most articulate speaker, but what I have come to realize, as others have in political discourse, is that the reason Harris sounds so lost and confused is, for one, obviously she doesn't know what the hell she's talking about. But she can't even cover that up with articulating the bullshit she is struggling to relay to the people. And that's severely damaging to her presidential campaign. Most politicians are full of shit, but of intermediate to extensive knowledge and experience in politics. Some don't know what the hell they're talking about as well, but they at least can articulate well enough that their ignorance somewhat gets glossed over, as their other characteristics or qualities are impactful. Harris, on the other hand, does not have that galvanizing character, such as Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, and even, dare I say, an AOC. They have charisma, although they're deranged. These individuals have influence in the Democratic base. Heck, even her communist running mate is more influential than her. She is the political version of a sloth. The mainstream media, the rallies, and her Hollyweird fan club tries to make her appear electric, motivating, inspirational, and such. But when Party Time USA is over and she has to sit down to discuss her plans, she is visibly uncomfortable, because she doesn't have a plan, which is constantly being exposed. Some may say, no, she does have a plan. It has been updated on her campaign website. Well, if it were truly her plans for America, which are still destructive, why is she having such a hard time relaying it to the American people then? Because she has no part in any of those policies. That's why she's having a hard time relaying those plans. See, someone who believes in a vision has plans they want to share, which they believe will bring about prosperity, peace, and unity to the nation, would be motivated and can communicate that message clear and precise, due to the confidence of knowing they have envisioned a greater place for the nation and the world. They don't have to be the most articulate, basic diction, using common words, will be cohesively communicated. But when the person is a deer caught in the headlights, they can't even cohesively communicate using common words, as they don't know what the hell they're talking about. So not only does she lack the ability to articulate a message, she can't even communicate on a fundamental level. Old Joe struggled to communicate as well, but everyone knew he knew what he was talking about. Harris doesn't have the political experience, and didn't take the opportunity to learn from her boss, who has 50 years of experience. And in some ways, she's worse than Old Joe when it comes to communicating. This person is actually running for President of the United States. She said, quote, "I'm going to employ." Do you know what that means? It means Harris is proposing to employ more federal government employees. But here's the wacky part of it. She conflated that statement, or proposal, with claiming to, quote, "engage the private sector." Now, what we assume she is trying to say is that she will give companies in the housing market, which is the private sector, tax credits to help build more affordable homes for citizens. Yet it came out fragmented and incoherent. How hard is that to articulate? Here's the problem. First of all, proposing $25,000 in federal funded aid for first-time home buyers is a recipe for disaster. It is similar to a previous problem, where ironically, black people were applying for home loans, approved, and due to not being able to actually afford the homes in association to their monthly income, they were evicted. And those homes were seized by the lender and then put on the auction block at a discounted price. Many were claiming it was designed for them to lose the homes. But if you aren't financially capable of affording the home, then don't accept the loans. The housing market doesn't care. They will get as much money out of the renter. And if they can't finish paying off the mortgage, oh well, seize it. Put it back out in the market and repeat the cycle over and over again. In relation to the black community, the single mother rate is very high. Imagine a single mother with 2 kids who is a first-time home buyer. But this is not the best scenario, as it would be best that there are 2 household monthly incomes to make paying that mortgage less stressful. But you can bet your bottom dollar that would end up being the bulk of the black community. because black couples wouldn't jump at that opportunity. They would make sure they are financially capable of actually paying off the mortgage, regardless if they are offered a $25,000 federal government funded down payment. Second, this does not guarantee that the first-time home buyer will commit to paying off the mortgage. So regardless if there is a $25,000 grant as a down payment, the renter still has to pay off the mortgage. Keep in mind, these programs already exist. It's just like the endless barrage of credit cards being dangled in your face. Oh yeah, you're approved for $10,000 in credit. Oh really? Sounds awesome. Then a year later, they've gotten behind on their monthly payments. And here comes the debt collectors. I could envision college seniors being bombarded with companies offering $25,000 in federal grants for homes. Tons of college students are duped by it, can't pay off the mortgage, and end up right back where they're supposed to be in their younger years, apartments. Yes, traditionally, we can say that apartments are for the younger generation. It is to teach them about paying a monthly bill being their rent, preparing them for paying off a mortgage. Third, you're not actually lowering the cost of the home. Sure, for the home buyer, but the property's value isn't dropping on the market. So a home cost $175,000 is still that amount on the market. A first-time home buyer can put that down payment on this home, in which the remaining total would be $150,000. Now I ask this question. At this current state in society, what age range is committed to paying off $150,000 mortgage? A very low percentage. The times have changed. Everything is moving fast. Relationships are fickle. The younger couples definitely don't want to commit to that significant other and settle down and have a family. The middle-aged group is keeping an eye on their checking and savings accounts, hoping they can keep their heads above water long enough to build future financial stability. And the older generation has already passed the phase of homeownership, which they pass the homes down to their children or grandchildren. The point, the first-time home buyer is something many would like to be. But the reality, that being the economic reality of millions of Americans, it will have to wait until they are financially stable. Also, what about non-first-time home buyers? The homes are expensive to them as well, right? So you're leaving a large percentage of the population out of this equation. What makes you think they will vote for you if you're excluding them from this benefit? Those are families. Some of them have been evicted, homeless, struggling to rebuild their credit. Oh, you know, Harris hasn't proposed anything for them. Who is she targeting here? Well, it seems the target group are young people, age ranged from 21 to 30. The problem here is that most still won't be able to afford those homes, because there are too many factors at play, and some fantasy land of thinking. Somehow a $25,000 federal grant will change those factors. Think about who exactly these individuals would be. Chances are the first-time home buyers have went to college, so they're paying off that debt. It's not realistic. You have to allow people to figure things out for themselves. But that's the Democrats' playbook, bigger government, and we'll make the best decisions for you. Here's a more comprehensive and realistic plan for housing. Just invest more into federal government housing. Now look at. Isn't that a great idea? It's the same money you're proposing, but it's government housing. Invest billions of dollars into the construction of thousands of government housing. Small sample size here. Build 100 one-bedroom homes, which the renter will pay $275 a month. In 12 months, this is $3,300 you've made. Multiply this by 100 renters, of course. This is $330,000 you've made. Build 500 two-bedroom homes, which the renter will pay $400 a month. That's $2,400,000 you made from 500 renters in a year. Build 1,000 three-bedroom homes, which the renter will pay $650 a month. That's $7,800,000 you made from 1,000 renters in a year. In 1 year, the federal government has made over $10 million in government housing payments. This is not a pro-government take, rather a logical solution to the housing crisis, which we all know is a result of this administration's irresponsible spending, including giving illegal immigrants government housing. We did a bit of number crunching, and found an interesting dynamic here. We calculated the average cost of each home, and the average total spending for building these homes is about $354 million. Sounds like a lot, right? And the government has a deficit. But think about how much money the federal government is spending on housing assistance right now. About $70 billion. Even if you built these homes in all 50 states, at each value and number, it's still a reasonable amount of $17 billion. Money thrown all over the place, right? Well, at least it's helping the American citizens, as opposed to throwing the money away into an illusion. Take that $391 billion spent on climate change. Slice $90 billion from it, and you have money to spare after covering the $17 billion government housing plan. The deficit of building those homes will be balanced out over time as the renters continue to make payments, and also with saving money elsewhere in millions and billions of useless spending, such as investing millions of dollars into climax, quote, research. What do you need to research? Nothing, useless spending. Now, some may say, nobody would want to pay that much for government housing. Here's the kicker. Once you pay off the mortgage of each home, of course, it's yours. But there's a clause you have to agree to. The home, after being paid off, can't be sold in the housing market. It has to be owned by the individual until they pass, or the home will be passed down to the next generation. But what if the family members don't want the home? Well, if nobody will claim it within a reasonable time, the federal government can then reclaim it and offer it to another applicant. It's the same concept on the market, but I guess all of this is too complex for Harris's brain. This plan is much more promising, offers more stability, as the cost of housing is lower, and it promotes generational home ownership. She doesn't know anything about economics, nothing about the housing market, nothing about the private sector. It's mind-blowing. But her initial statement in that portion was, quote, I will employ, unquote. Employing federal government employees have nothing to do with offering tax credits to private sector companies, you see? So why did she mention hiring federal government employees in regards to the housing market? She has no idea why she said it in connection to it. It was a knee-jerk admission of what her agenda is, more federal government control. That's the key statement, because it's proposing bigger government and more government jobs. Government jobs are still jobs, of course. But this is all Democrats can offer, bigger government. Heck, Maxine Waters, in a 2008 congressional hearing, literally stated that she proposed that the federal government will socialize the oil industry. This congressional hearing was over high gas prices, which was during the two wars between Iraq and Afghanistan. So, of course, gas prices were being leveraged. But despite this, Maxine Waters blurted out what Democrats truly want to do. She mentioned that if the situation didn't improve, the federal government might need to take over and run the oil companies. Yes, take over and run the oil companies, which are private-owned companies. Waters also stated, paraphrasing, quote, this Congress is about socializing, then caught herself. But then, in a moment of defiance, as it already slipped out, that's when she just went ahead and stated, the federal government will take over and run those oil companies. Many people claim that gun right activists use the Second Amendment as an excuse. Well, the reason that amendment was put in place was to protect the sovereign citizen from immediate threats such as trespassers, but also to protect that sovereign citizen against a tyrannical government. And what Maxine Waters displayed in that hearing was an example of what a tyrannical government looks like. First, take over and run oil companies, and any other company that they feel doesn't, quote, satisfy them. They'll knock their doors down as well, and take over and run their companies. So this type of government control in the Democratic Party isn't new, just new faces. Didn't Harris propose to, quote, ban price gouging? That's a slick way of saying we will take over your companies if you don't abide by our rules. Harris is a puppet for such a communist-based push in the Democratic Party, but she's definitely not helping anyone. Nothing for the average American citizens in the working class. They don't receive anything. What about the lower and middle class? Don't they all collectively get a tax break? Trump did it, remember? Everyone, yes, everyone benefited from Trump's tax cuts, from the poorest citizens to the richest citizens. The more money people had, the more they had to spend, which circulated back into the economy. That's why the economy was doing well. Yet, Harris has not proposed this for the American people. because she's not navigating the ship. I'm going to call it a day for this episode. Everyone called it. The reason Kamala Harris had been hiding from being interviewed was this very reason. It's humiliating to sit in that chair and sound politically ignorant as the current Vice President of the United States, who is required to be politically educated. She embarrassed herself as Vice President. She embarrassed the journalists who invited her. She embarrassed the audience members. She embarrassed the Democratic Party, although they deserve it, and she embarrassed the United States in front of the world. I'm done.
Well, I'm questioning if I want to pick up where you left off, to be honest. I'll try to get through it. Harris focused on there being a housing shortage, but why is there a housing shortage? Well, she claimed houses are too expensive, right? Why are houses so expensive? The same reason eggs are so expensive. The same reason gas is so expensive. The same reason why mostly everything is so expensive. It's called, get this, inflation, which you are partly responsible for. And she doesn't even have the dignity to accept that responsibility and promise to fix it. Well, how can she accept the responsibility for it when it was clearly done to destroy the economy? And see, this is why Harris is out of her depths, because the agenda of the left has been to destroy the country through such radical and outrageous policies and spending. It's not by accident, it's intentional. And if she were to accept responsibility for the economic crisis, she is accepting responsibility that this administration intentionally destroyed the economy. Wouldn't be able to gain much support with that admission. Harris is literally stuck in a jam of either continuing to duck and dodge with incoherent blabbering, which doesn't help her case for president, or admit that this administration failed the American people. But she has a plan to redeem herself in a new administration. The first predicament is definitely going to impact the voters who are currently supporting her. They will start to think twice about that vote and lean towards Trump, or just not vote. The second predicament, which is at least an honest and humble approach, may gain Harris some sympathy based on her honesty, but I don't think that translates to a redeeming factor for their votes. But let me try to continue with the event. Keep in mind this is verbatim. In response to a question about black men leaning more towards Trump, as they believe he has a better economic plan for America, this is her response. Quote, I started an economic opportunity tour focused on black men, understanding that, for example, we have so many entrepreneurs in the community who do not have access to capital, but they have great ideas and incredible work ethic and ambition, the aspiration, the dream, but don't have the relationships necessarily. So my work has included, as vice president, getting billions of more dollars into community banks, including working with big banks to do that. Okay, we have to stop right here. First of all, this is considered a stall tactic, as Harris is speaking like someone who is thinking about a plan in real time, as opposed to already having a plan, which she claimed to have. Which brings me to that so-called economic opportunity tour for black men, getting billions of dollars into community banks, including working with big banks to do that. How can a big bank give a community bank money? Well, would they loan that community bank money? Sure, why not, but follow the disaster. The big bank gets the money from the federal government, which is a loan, by the way. That's where the money trickles down from. The federal government gives the big bank a loan. The big bank gives the small bank a loan. Then the small bank gives the black man a loan. The big bank owes the federal government, the small bank owes the big bank, and the black man owes the small bank. But guess who will end up on the short end of the stick? The party that will have a hard time paying back the loan, which is the black man. The small bank can be bailed out, the big bank can be bailed out, but the black man has to suffer with that potential loan debt. Nobody will bail him out of that debt, you see? But let's keep going. Quote, right now startup entrepreneurs and small businesses only get a tax credit deduction of $5,000. Nobody can start a small business with $5,000. So I'm expanding that to $50,000. All right, that's enough, it's over. Nobody can start a business with $5,000. Tell that to people who started a business from nothing. Again, Harris is not in touch with reality, but is spewing rhetoric as if she understands the working class. There are tons of examples of people starting businesses with virtually nothing. And get this, they didn't have to take out a loan from the bank. Let's say you have a black man who has a vision of starting their own clothing line. Instead of taking out a loan, they work, save money every year, crunch the numbers on how much it will cost for materials, tools, equipment, etc. They estimate how much this will be, and they save the amount of money to start production. Start off small, selling their clothing in local malls and such, have business cards and a website. All of this is considered pocket change as far as a budget. Then, the clientele increases as the customers like the designs and affordability. Good old supply and demand, right? Consumer base increases, revenue increases, quality of product increases, and that brings about more consumers, and the cycle repeats itself. And this is how you end up with, guess what? Millionaires and even billionaires. Now this clothing line, a black man starting from working hard and saving and investing in the idea, transforms into a multi-million-dollar company with hundreds of staff members. How many success stories have we heard about where someone started from nothing, working the typical 9 to 5, saving, budgeting, being determined to pursue their goals, and end up successful, hundreds and even thousands? Yet Harris doesn't see it this way. She wants to dump a $50,000 tax deduction on small business owners. And not just small business owners who are already established. She also proposes up to a $50,000 tax deduction on startup entrepreneurs. It's a pseudo term, they're simply entrepreneurs, that's it. You don't need to add the term startup to it to make it appear distinct. The point is, an entrepreneur in essence is someone who may have some elements of an established business, but they are in the process of developing an actual business. And Kamala Harris is proposing to dump up to $50,000 in tax deductions, which is real money. She's proposing to potentially give this entrepreneur this large sum of money starting it. Yeah, we want you in debt, buddy, just like the credit card companies. I mean, does she even understand what she's saying? If we take her for her word in saying nobody can start a business with $5,000, and she's proposing to help them start a business with $50,000. Oh my days, complete insanity. You can start a business with $5,000. It's not about how much money is invested into it. It's about if the idea or product is in demand. Once you establish the business, your profit will come. In some cases, a restaurant started out as a food truck, which started out as simply cooking food at family reunions. A business loan doesn't guarantee that the business will be successful. The idea of the business guarantees the success. Your determination is all that's needed. But let me go back to entrepreneurship. I explained it prior, but let's dig into crunching numbers with the same black man. This black man works as a retail supervisor, 24 years old, who makes about $20 an hour. At 40 hours a week, this totals to about $3,200 a month. With his goal in mind of starting his own clothing line, he saves $500 a month, which is about $6,000 a year. He had a 5-year investment plan, and this gives him an investment of $30,000 at the age of 29. Mind you, he is still working and has been promoted to manager. These are the nuances of this issue that Harris isn't focusing on, by the way. He purchases a high-quality heat press machine, purchases quality t-shirts for his designs, and starts producing. Now he still has over $20,000 remaining, which he can use for building a website, registering with his state for the business, gain business partners or employees who may know how to sew, create logo designs, etc. This all happened in 5 years. Started with his own money, he saved and invested, no business loans, he doesn't have to pay back, 100% profit from that perspective. Now Harris doesn't want this black man, or anyone else for that matter, to save and invest. She wants to dump large amounts of money out there in federal government funding through bank loans, which those entrepreneurs will have to pay back. And often, most small businesses or entrepreneurs go bankrupt or end up in debt because they don't make enough in profits in relation to the loans they have to pay back. Sometimes things don't work out, but I would rather have my own money invested in a failure than to have to pay back someone else, being the bank/government, for borrowing their money in my failure, because it's more burdensome to have to pay back loans, which if you can't, would potentially prevent you from obtaining another loan in the future. Kamala Harris isn't spreading the message of saving money and investing. She's essentially spreading the message of socialism. And then you have to also factor in this issue. The IRS is in the business of taking your money, yes, flat out stealing your money. Do you honestly think that the IRS will be pleased with giving up to $50,000 in tax deductions? Oh, okay, no problem. will just get the money from everyone else to make up the loss. Economically illiterate, and that's why black men favor Trump over her, because they know he understands economics and the economy. And there's more, of course, if you give a $50,000 tax deduction for these small businesses. Who the hell do you think is going to pay for that? Let me guess, the rich by raising their taxes, right? Well, that would include Oprah Winfrey, who just interviewed you. That would include all those Hollywood celebrities who were zooming in that interview. And it will also include CEOs of major companies, which will impact their ability to raise wages, increase staff, and expand their businesses that reach greater regions, which would employ more citizens. Think about what Harris has proposed thus far since she was nominated. $25,000 in federal government aid, which is basically a loan for first-time home buyers. $50,000 tax deductions for small business owners. Billions of dollars invested in small banks for business loans. These proposals alone are being tacked on to the current inflation. Harris can't fix the economy, let alone fix the economic hardships in the black community, because she doesn't understand the back end of her plans. Cause and effect, pros and cons, the good and the bad, critical thinking skills, which allow you to determine if your idea will be more beneficial or detrimental. Put it into context. It's obvious who's in bed with the federal government more, and that would be the Democratic Party. Harris's child tax credit is ridiculous, and be careful in how you're reviewing this, as it's extremely misleading. Quote, also included in the suite of proposals Harris unveiled in August was the restoration of the American Rescue Plan Act's popular expansion of the child tax credit to as much as $3,600, up from $2,000. She is calling for the beefed-up credit, which was only in effect in 2021, to be made permanent. The share of children in poverty fell by nearly half that year, thanks mainly to the temporary credit enhancement, according to the Census Bureau. Oh wait, did they say the Census Bureau? The same bureau that performs surveys on American households, which illegal immigrants were added to by this administration. That same Census Bureau. Are you fucking kidding me? So it's no wonder, quote, child poverty fell by nearly half that year, as millions of illegal immigrants were included in the statistics. Let's keep going. The plan would also add new child tax credit of up to $6,000 for middle-class and lower-income families with children in their first year of life. Wait, first year of life? Did you really use the term life? As in the life of the child, as is in the life that was once a fetus in the mother's womb? Yeah, anyway, beefing up the child tax credit would cost $1.1 trillion over a decade, while creating a credit for newborns would add another $100 billion to the price tag, according to the Center of Responsible Federal Budget. Unquote. Now, with all this spending, those middle-class and low-income families should be able to find financial stability, allowing for more generational wealth, and cut down on high levels of poverty, right? Not so fast. Harris doesn't propose to cut down on poverty yet, proposes to cut down on, get this, child poverty. Now, if I'm not mistaken, those children are being raised by adults who are their parents, right? Meaning, how can you address the children, but not the parents that are raising those children? You see? But then again, I guess they can cut down on child poverty if you have millions of migrants who are unaccompanied. We know this isn't about actually cutting down on poverty, because it's in how they are framing it. Quote, the share of children in poverty fell by nearly half that year, unquote. It doesn't say, quote, the share of Americans in poverty fell by nearly half that year. You understand? But that's the anomaly of the claim. Because if the share of children in poverty decreased, then doesn't this mean their living conditions improved? But how can it improve without the parents being responsible for that living condition? Oh, let me guess. It's like what Tim Walz proposed, taking the children from the parents because they rejected gender reassignment care. In other words, the Democrats will help children by giving the parents child tax credits, but will never actually help the American citizens who are also parents. The Jedi mind tricks of their fuckery, you see. I won't help you, but I'll help your children. Translation, your children belong to us. Let me break that down a bit more. When Harris claims to, quote, help lower cost for families, she's not actually focusing on the parents in those families. Because if she were, there would be a proposal of cutting federal taxes of those middle and lower class workers. Instead, to make it appear this is what she's doing, she offers more in child tax credits. But let's be honest, parents already receive significant amounts of tax credits in their tax refunds annually. The average refund for dependents claimed on your taxes is about $3,000. If you add more to this claim, such as 4 dependents, this is about $12,000 in tax refunds. Throughout the year, parents are eligible for government assistance, such as local and state government programs, for healthcare, food, and other services based on having children. So focusing on increasing the child tax credit isn't the answer. It's unnecessary government spending and is essentially putting a price tag on children, which is very distasteful. But we know who Harris is targeting here: Black women and Mexican women, legal and illegal Mexican single mothers, who make up the highest percentage of single motherhood. These are the targets more so than the overall population. It's not about building stronger families, it's about incentivizing single mother families. In addition, referring back to the proposal to build stronger families, these type of policies actually provoke more single motherhood in the Black community. Sounds familiar? It was the Democratic policies of the past that did the very same thing. I mean, look at her policies. There is nothing about cutting taxes for the American citizens. She is proposing everything else but that when it comes to economics. This is of course on purpose. Bigger tax deductions for small businesses. Cut red tape for small businesses. Higher taxes on the wealthy and corporations. Now see, this one is alluding to cutting taxes on the lower and middle class, but it doesn't actually say it. So what does this mean? Well, there will be no taxes cut for the lower and middle class. Might not be increased, but why would they vote for you when they can vote for your opponent, who will propose to cut taxes for those groups? Housing support, price gouging ban, enhanced child tax credit as mentioned prior, affordable health care, cut taxes on tips. Yeah, steal your opponent's plan. And this is still not a proposal of cutting taxes for the American citizens as a whole. This is a specific group of workers who don't receive traditional paychecks. So despite the optics and message of helping American families and lower and middle class America, it's nothing more than a bunch of money being once again set on fire in the faces of American citizens. And when you factor in that a significant percentage of the child tax credit spending will go to migrant families, illegals included, it's not actually proposed for American citizens. This is flat out bonkers, in conclusion here. The more Harris talks, the more Democrats wish they hadn't kicked old Joe to the curb. Because as of right now, he looks like a pretty solid candidate compared to Kamala Harris, which is horrifying. And it's crazy how things pan out, because old Joe is going to tiptoe away and Harris is front and center, just melting into a blob of nothingness, who is representing the Democratic Party. She should have been a high school principal, cackling over the intercom. Would have been loved by the students. This is the chaos sector,